Well, hello plant lovers. It is Matthew in Melbourne welcoming you to my channel. Thanks for finding me here in the crowded world of orchid videos on YouTube. I try to grow cold, cool, intermediate orchids here in Melbourne, Australia without any help from many things, but without greenhouses or grow lights or humidifiers, no equipment, really just me and them struggling along, mainly outside these days with one or two inside, trying to find our way to success. Now, if that sounds like your conditions, do hit subscribe because I post every week and my ramblings are amateur, but it might help you figure out how to grow the orchids that you want. And today's video, plant lovers, may come as no surprise, but ta-da, look, it is late spring here in Australia and there are so many fabulous orchids in bloom at the moment. I just thought I'd do a quick roundup of what's in bloom this late spring. So yes, I am in a veritable bower of orchids here, lots of great colors. So without further ado, let's kind of go through it one by one. Now, I'm kind of hemmed in, so I'm not going to be able to show you a great deal of detail. But obviously, first of all, the elephant in the room is this enormous Cymbidium. Isn't it fabulous? Now, they are just beginning to go over. It is late spring, and this is a hybrid no-ID Cymbidium. So one of the cool climate growers. So the genetics are drawn from the Chinese species that are cool mountain growers. Look at that, isn't it stunning? It's late in the season for Cymbidiums, but a couple of mine are still going strong. This being one, and the other being my late mother-in-law's orchid, which I made a rescue video of. That is still in bloom and going strong. Not enough room to show you, but this one is cousin Joss's orchid. Now, I made an orchid rescue video about this particular plant. A friend of mine's father's cousin had unfortunately died, and my friend was charged with winding up the estate and dealing with the house. Now, he wasn't a big orchid collector, but like many Melbourne houses, he had some giant pots with Cymbidium spotted around on the various terraces of the house, and this was one. So I helped my friend divide them, repot them, and I took half of this particular one. Now, we had no inkling as to what the colors might be, but this is a lovely sort of pale lemon yellow, but with the most beautiful red lip. Anyway, so cousin Joss's orchid is still growing strong. One spike for me this year. It's putting on new growth as it's the time of year for it, which is really great. And if you want to know more about growing Cymbidiums, I've got a whole playlist, which I'll link above for you. Very easy to grow in my climate. They are understory plants, so basically they want dappled light, they want more moisture in summer, a little less in winter, but not bone dry in winter, but just ease it up as much as you can. Although here, a lot of people grow them outside and you can grow them under trees where they'll get a bit of protection in winter and the perfect amount of dappled light. The important thing is to give them enough dappled light, particularly in winter, which is why deciduous trees are great, so that you will promote the flower spike production. So the hybrids tend to produce their spikes in winter, sort of mid-ish winter, takes a while, and then those flowers open late winter, early spring. Depending on the hybrid, though, they can still keep going quite late in the season, like this one. Depends when the blooms actually opened, and on the season to some degree. And we had quite a dry winter, but a really wet and actually quite stormy spring, and it's raining and overcast today. So there you go, which is actually great for orchids because it's relatively warm, but relatively humid. Anyway, Cymbidium, the last of the Cymbidium still in bloom, cousin Joss's orchid, living its best life, producing new growth. So next year I should have another spike as well. Okay, I'm going to have to move cousin Joss so that I'm a little freer. Okay, well, next up on the What's in Bloom roundabout, the next stop, ting ting, is Coelogynes. Now, most of my Coelogynes are done and dusted. They flower in earlier spring for me, but there were a few variants in that. But so my Flacida and Unchained Melody and the Alba form of Unchained Melody all tend to flower at the same time. And I made a video about those this year, which I'll link above a few months ago. But then there's a few outliers. Now this one, let me just see if I can navigate it out for you. There we go. Look at that. Beautiful, beautiful flowers. Now, quite an upright raceme, but very classic Coelogyne flowers. Beautiful white with that really egg yolk yellow center to the lip. Now, this one is a hybrid, and it's Coelogyne Kirribilli Ellen, which is a cross between Muriana and Assamica. Now, Kirribilli is a fabulous suburb in Sydney, for those of you not in Australia. It's where the official residence of the Prime Minister and the Governor General is in Sydney. Beautiful, right on the harbour. And the grower that produced a lot of Coelogyne hybrids in Australia lived there, hence a lot of them have that prefix Kirribilli. So this one is an absolute stunner. And A little different in that the flowers are sort of smaller. The raceme is quite upright, but the most beautiful thing. Now, often they have a fragrance. Yes, and this one smells of jonquils. Now, what I have noticed, and you might notice another Coelogyne here, which we'll get to, a lot of these hybrid Coelogynes for me flower randomly. And this one, which we'll get to next, can flower 2 or 3 times in the year for me, whereas the species and Unchanged Melody, which is a hybrid, tend to only flower once a year for me. So this is a newish orchid for me. It's the first time it's flowered, but it's flowering at a time of year when I think, I think the odds are that you are going to be like this cousin over here and just flower whenever you feel like it, which is great because Coelogynes are beautiful, very easy to grow. Now, if you can grow Cymbidiums, my cousin Joss's Cymbidiums, you'll be able to grow Coelogynes because they basically like the same kind of care, except you'd want to elevate a Coelogyne more so that it gets more air movement, whereas Cymbidiums can be a little lower at ground level if that's how you're growing them. Often on an upturned pot's a great way to grow Cymbidiums, but Coelogynes, you can just hang them above your Cymbidiums if you're able to do that. But a very, very beautiful orchid, easy to grow, bright in direct light, really plenty of moisture all year for this particular type. These are the cooler climate growing Coelogynes, so from the Himalayas. There are warmer growing ones which will not survive outside all year for me. This one is outside all year, but a stunning thing. So if you have some of the single flower in the year type of Coelogynes, why not try and find one of these hybrids that can multiply bloom for you? So you'll get a bit of Coelogyne love whenever you want it. And well, if we're talking Coelogyne love, look at this. Yes, this is Coelogyne Jannine Banks. Now, this is a plant that I've featured many times. Look at that flower. It's absolutely stunning. So as you can see, the raceme is more pendulous. The flowers are much larger, but essentially the same. Pure white with a very, very deep egg yolk yellow interior to the flower. And Jannine Banks is another one of the hybrids from that same grower in Sydney. And this one, the same fragrance, and they smell like daffodils or jonquils, a really, really beautiful fragrance. And Jannine Banks flowers for me whenever she feels like it. Now, you get flower spikes from the newly matured growths. And as you could probably see in this Coelogyne, there are 2 new growths emerging right now, and they'll be mature in sort of 4-ish months. So it is now early spring. I'd say perhaps in autumn I might get more blooms from this one. And Jannine, she just puts on growth whenever she wants. So I've got a couple of mature pseudobulbs. I've got a couple of new growths, so who knows? Now, I have had 3 flower spikes. It's the maximum that I've ever had actually from Jannine, but 1 is more than enough because it's so beautiful and the fragrance is delicious. And I just love having these 2 flowers in bloom at the same time. Utterly delicious. So Coelogyne Jannine Banks in bloom, late spring, loving that. So Jannine Banks, regular bloomer for me. And just hanging up here, what you might be able to see, if we can unhook it, is another old favorite of mine, Dendrobium victoriae-reginae. Now look at that. Look how the plant is growing tremendously. Now I've just got 2 flowers. Now in the past I've said this plant is basically never out of bloom, which is generally true, but I've just moved. Well, I haven't just, I moved 3 months ago. And there were no flowers on it when I moved, and it hasn't flowered since. So whenever you move a plant, when it was in its happy place, it's always tricky because you just never know. So I was thrilled to see that I was able to get 2 new flowers, and these were initiated in the new location. So it means it's getting enough light, the air movement is fine. But look at all this growth. So I've made videos about this, so I won't go into it too long for you. But as you can see, that this cane is just about bereft of leaves. There's a few hanging on at the end. So as the canes mature, like this one, the leaves start to drop off, and the first flowers tend to initiate at the apex of the cane, and then they'll move along the leaf nodes of the stem. So the canes can continue flowering for many, many years, even though, like this one, they might be completely naked. So don't trim off these leafless canes thinking they're dead. Now, this one is getting quite shriveled, but you just never know. And in fact, is something happening? No, I'm not sure. You'll know when the canes are dead because they will really desiccate and go a sort of a yellowy, browny orange color. That's when they're dead and you can then trim them off. But this can essentially keep blooming from the same canes. Now, it won't bloom from the same spot, But there are so many leaf nodes along the branch, as you can see, that there are many, many opportunities for flowering on these plants. Anyway, Dendrobium victoriae-reginae, I'm really thrilled it has flowered for me here in our new location, because this is one of my favorite orchids. Always in bloom. Everyone says it's blue, like it's the blue orchid. It's not, as you can see. It's violet, Elizabeth Taylor violet. Now, people often ask me in the comments whenever I mention this video where they can get one from. And the sad news is I can't tell you because they are just not often available. So this particular one came from an organization called Orchid Species Plus, and I'll put the link below for you. It is just not a common orchid, I'm afraid. So even though they may have once sold it, they might not have it again. Thing is, keep checking eBay, and with anything, join your local orchid club, because that is the best way to find orchids that are sort of out of the common realm, really, because orchid clubs will always have auctions and swaps and raffles and all sorts of things, often annual big sales where you'll find amazing things. So just Google orchid club near me, orchid group near me, or find your national orchid organization and see if they've got a list of local clubs and organizations which you can join. That's the best way to find orchids in your area, I think, and also to find out how people are growing them. Anyway, Dendrobium victoriae-reginae, very, very happy it's decided to bloom for me in its new location. Next up here, we can just see these two gorgeous magenta flowers. So this is an Epicattleya. Now, I got this from the wonderful Mariana at Whitehill Nursery when I was down there, or in winter, early winter, midwinter actually, filming, making some films about her wonderful orchid nursery. She grows a lot of Australian Dendrobium orchids, but also Cattleyas, Coelogynes, Sarcochilus orchids, Cymbidiums, Psychopedilums, which she's an expert. And she gives workshops, actually. I'll put the link below. Anyway, as I was leaving, she had a few of these Epicattleas. Now, some of these are a cross between Epidendrum and Cattleya. And some of those tend to look more Cattleya-like and some more Epidendrum-like. But this one certainly has got more Epidendrum qualities. But the leaves and form are bigger than the general Epidendrum, and the flowers are much bigger. Look at that. Now, it's a no ID, I'm afraid, but look at the beautiful magenta and then the softer pink lip. Absolutely stunning. And this really hasn't been out of flower. So I'm giving this the same care as I would an epidendrum, which is basically full sun out there in the garden, just doing its business. Now, you'll often find these planted outside in the garden here in Australia. Obviously, the further north you get, the more tropical, the happier they are. Melbourne's a little cold and chilly, but as long as it's got really good drainage, it's going to be fine outside. It can take our cool winter nighttime minimums, which don't, in the inner city, don't freeze, we don't get frost, but it can get pretty close to 0 centigrade, maybe 2-3 degrees centigrade, which is the high 30s, low 40s Fahrenheit. It can manage that. So full sun, watering, whenever you feel like it. Really, they're pretty tough. They can deal with no water for quite a while, but ultimately, if you're giving it a bit more of a regular water, you'll get better growth and better flowers. So there you go, very, very easy. And I've made an epidendrum video, and I would give this the same care. I'll link that above. Okay, the wheels of state keep turning, because look, yes, Sarcochilus. Now, I made a Sarcochilus video a few weeks ago because it was sort of peak Sarc time. So the first one that comes out for me is Sarcochilus hartmanii, a species. And then usually about 2 or 3 weeks later, just as that's starting to go over, all the hybrids start to come out. And now that I've got so many, I have a first flush, which have gone, and a second flush, which are just opening and at their prime. So I'm just showing you these now. Now, unfortunately, not all of them, in fact, very few of them have cultivar names. So I'm sorry about that. There are so many cultivars available in Australia, and it's one of the few things that you can ship out of Australia. So there are a few growers here that sell flasks of Sarcochilus, and you can actually export a flask of orchids without a license. You just need to know the botanic name, which the supplier would give you. So that's one of the few things that you can easily import and export to Australia. It's very hard to import seeds and live plant material or bulbs anymore. You need a license. It's very complicated and very time consuming, and really not remotely possible for an individual, only if you're a large organization. However, if you're somewhere where you want to have a go at Sarks, there are a few nurseries that sell flasks, and I'll put the links below for you. But this one, no ID, but look at that beautiful red. And look at the back of the flowers. It's really, can we see there? really speckled, there we go, a really speckled red, delicious flower. I love Sarcochilus. Now I made a video with Dan a couple of years ago, who's a specialist grower. Learned a lot from him. He waters his a lot more than I do. So I've really tried to focus on keeping the water up for mine. I will say the Sarcochilus is one of the most forgiving orchids. So you can dehydrate it, you can burn it, and it will come back. Difficulty is though that the leaves stay on the plant for years. So if you do burn them by giving it too much direct sun, you will be reminded of your miscare for years, but they can bounce back even if they're rootless. Now I've had rootless plants, and because they produce aerial roots, so you can see here, so there's a root just emerging in that leaf bracket there, then there are these here. It will very quickly stimulate root growth. So if you've received one in the post or you've ordered one and it's in bad condition and the roots are gone, I would just lay it on some sphagnum moss, maybe with a couple of bits of bark to weigh it down, and just keep it moist-ish, not too wet because it will rot, and then just allow those roots to begin to develop and go into the sphagnum moss. So it'll take a few months, but you can revive sarcs. And they're one of the earliest types of orchids to grow from a seedling too. So very good value vis-a-vis the flasks. It's a good plant to buy from flasks and relatively easy to grow from a flask. Now I made a deflasking video with Michael Coker, which I'll link above. He's the king of deflasking, I think. So give it a good Aussie go. Look at this one. Absolutely divine. And this is called Maria Jam Drop. Look at that. Gorgeous flowers. I love Sarcochilus. And, you know, the more you have, which I'm not encouraging, but the more you have, the more the flower season gets extended because they don't last a huge amount of time and they only flower once a year. But whatever. This one is a lovely sort of, what are we calling that? A sort of rust. Let's call it rust. Now, does this have a cultivar name? No, it's a cross between Culnara taser oh my and Culnara opus vision. There you go. Too many crosses, but look, a very, very lovely color, somewhat unusual, sort of an orangey rust ochre. And then we have this really pretty yellow one, which again does not have a cultivar name, but it's a cross between Culnara Duet Golden Spark and Culnara Taser Bethany. There you go. Now, Culnara is one of the hybrid types that's really great to have in the genetic DNA. The flowers tend to be larger, more open, and the flower spike a bit more upright. So if you see Culnara in any of the hybrid names, you'll be sure, I think, to get a really stunning flower. Let me get out of the way and it will focus. I love this though, butter yellow, although it's more sort of apricot, isn't it? Beautiful, beautiful. So that's that one. And then we have one more. There we go. Look at that. Slightly more speckled than Jam Drop, slightly more pink. And what are we calling this one? This does have a cultivar name. Let's have a look. Oh, well, that's hilarious. It's actually got two tags. So who knows what it's called? So one of them says Peace crossed with Cracker. And the other says Sarcochilus Marta, red and white. Well, it is red and white. Anyway, who knows really? And to be honest, a lot of the sarcs do look the same. So for me, it's just a question of getting a variety of spotting and flower size and color. So that's what I've been aiming for. So this year is a really good year. A few didn't flower, a few were really set back because my last conditions weren't perfect. I just really didn't have strong enough light for a lot of them. Now these do want bright indirect light, but not direct light because they will burn very easily. Gentle morning sun is okay, but harsher than that and they will burn. And interestingly, Dan grows his in the same spot that he grows his Masdevallia, so they get the same amount of light and probably the same amount of water. So water well, bright indirect light, outdoors all year. They can certainly take my temperatures. Great Australian orchid, very, very beautiful and usually floriferous and easy to flower from a seedling. And then talking of Masdevallia, were we? Yes, we were. A couple of mine still in bloom. I've had a really bumper season. Now look at this one. I featured this one before because it is so floriferous, and I've just realized the tag is missing. I think I may have named it in the previous video, so I'll have to go and have a look. And if I can find the name, I'll put it in the comments below, or I'll put it on a little banner across. But it's the prettiest magenta Masdevallia and always floriferous, and I can see so much new growth in there. So there tends to be a flush of flowers in spring for me, but they can then spot flower throughout the year and sometimes to gay abandon, as it were. And this one had a bit of a flush before, so some of those flower spikes have gone over, and now these 4 flowers are remaining, but it's so beautiful. Masdevallia are a cloud forest orchid generally, higher parts of the Andes. So they really love our conditions. They don't want to freeze once again, but they can get pretty low. They like bright indirect light, like our sarcs, and plenty of moisture all the time because they don't have a pseudobulb. But I must say, a lot tougher than you think. So you can actually be a little bit sloppy and perhaps forget to water them, and they will forgive you. So they're not going to immediately shrivel and die. What they don't like is really hot temperatures. So in those conditions, you do need to make sure you're misting and spraying and keeping them cool and moist when it gets to really stinky hot summer weather, which we have. So this one is in bloom, which is a gorgeous magenta. And this one, which is a really beautiful speckled orange. Isn't that a stunning flower? And this one is called Supernova Red Hot Chilli. And this came from Mount Benak Orchids, and I'll put the link below. They're also a great source for Sarcochilus orchids as well. So there you go. Been a good season for my Masdevallia. I feel again, because we've moved, my plants are just getting better light, consistently better lights. And a lot of them just went bing, lots of new growth. A lot of them that weren't looking happy are looking much happier, and I'm getting much more flowers. So very happy with those. I have a Masdevallia playlist, I think, or at least a care video, which I'll link. Very easy to take care of once you find the right spot. Okay, how are we going? 2 more to go. So this I've just made a video about, but it is still in bloom. So I just wanted to show you, because this is a first time bloomer for me. Trichopilia tortilis, there we go. Fabulous cooler grower. And when I made my video about this standalone video, a few viewers said it will take your temperatures outside. So I was too frightened to do that, but I will. But just showing you the flower, I've made the care video, won't go into it anymore. But look, tortilis by name, tortilis by nature. So it's tortured or twisting the petals and the sepals. A really gorgeous flower. So here to say it's lasted over a month inside, but look, such a great flower. I really now just want to work on building up this plant so I get more growth points and so more flowers next spring. Anyway, still in bloom, loving that. Okay. Oh, I've just noticed there's another orchid on the floor. I was about to say the last cab I'll throwing, but it's not. So this is a no ID florist Phalaenopsis, but look at the form of that flower. Isn't it beautiful? So in our move, one of the brutal decisions I had to come to was I had too many white rescue Phalaenopsis. You can get them anywhere, and people often give them to you. So I have to say I got rid of them all, which is maybe 3 or 4. Just didn't see the point anymore, which is sad. You know, I think we all go through that let's rescue a white Phalaenopsis phase in the early days of our orchid growing career. But this one I actually bought because I loved the form of the flower, and this I have kept. Now, as you can see, this is the original flower spike, which died. Well, it didn't. The flowers died. So the thing with Phalaenopsis, these hybrids, is the flower spike will either drop its flowers, stay green, or drop its flowers and the whole spike goes yellow and dies. If the whole spike dies, obviously no choice but to cut it off and then wait a year, because to change the season in autumn, it'll stimulate flowers, and Bob's your uncle, you'll get a new growth. But sometimes if the spike stays green, it will then sprout from one of the nodes a new raceme, as this one has done, with new flowers and new buds. And then when these drop, the same thing will happen, perhaps from one of these nodes. So you can kind of get sequential blooming for a long time. It might then start to get really unwieldy after a few years, so you might want to chop it, but ultimately it keeps going. The flowers are the same size, as beautiful, as vigorous. You keep watering and feeding the plant as you would, but otherwise, I'm all for the non-chop, or just letting the orchid do whatever it wants to do, which in this case is bloom again. So this is a regular white phal, no ID, from a nursery, but look at the shape of the flower, which is what drew me to it, and it's back in bloom, very happy. Okay, the flower that I forgot, the plant I forgot was in bloom, is this, Cattleya. Now, this is a Cattleya Claesiana, and it's called flamea, and I featured this a few times in my Cattleyas in a Cold Climate, the lost Nancy Mitford novel, because this I got as a seedling from a chain store, hardware store here called Bunnings, which has little plastic slips with orchids for $8.95. I bought it when I had no idea what I was doing. The plant grew and grew and grew and grew and grew, never did anything. didn't know what I was doing. And then I just gave up and thought, oh, you can just go outside. Anyway, putting it outside, it loves it. And it's flowered for me quite consistently. So I've got a couple, there's another bud there, look. So this one just keeps going. The downside is I don't love the flowers. It's one of those hybrids with speckling. And I have another one that's almost identical, which is also in bloom at the same time, which I made a video about saying, you know, you get these flowers to bloom, you get these plants to bloom, and then you don't like the flower. Anyway, I'm keeping it because it's such a vigorous beast and it's such a reliable flower. The flowers last for a long time. They're a really bright sort of pepto pink. So anyway, we're giving this still some room in the inn, but this is something else that's in bloom now. Cattleya. Okay, and now very quickly, just because this is about what's in bloom, this is what is coming into bloom. And I have got, well, 2 new flowerers and 1 first-time repeat flowerer for me to show you. So this first plant is Cleisocentron gokusingii. There you go. There's the name there. Me out of the way. And this has blue flowers. Now look, it's very, very vanda-like, but can you see these buds forming all the way up the stem in between, well, the opposite side of the leaf nodes? Isn't that fabulous? So there's 1, 2, 3 flower spikes. I bought this at the last Orchid Species Society sale. Actually, not the last one because I didn't go to that, but the one before. And it's a cool grower, cool, cold grower, even though it looks as though it's going to be so tropical. So it's been outside all winter. We're now into late spring and it's getting its gear on. So it's obviously a stem cutting, I presume, but it's quite well rooted. I haven't repotted it. I wanted it to just keep establishing itself, and now it's going to flower. So I might repot it after it's flowered. Then again, I might not, because it's not bursting out of the pot and the medium's fine. But I just wanted to show you that when this flowers, I will do a standalone video because it will be something to behold, and there's a lot to say about it, I think. Now, another new flower for me is Warczewiczella discolor. There you go. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, so forgive me. Again, I bought this at the same time, and what you can see is a flower bud there and a flower bud here. Now, this is a cool, cold grower, and I've kept it outside all winter. And as you can see, loving life, all to the point where it's blooming, but the leaves are really green and healthy. It doesn't have massive pseudobulbs, as you can see, so it's something I've been keeping as moist as I can, but I'm just thrilled to see those buds emerging from this plant. Now, once again, I didn't repot it. I bought it at the beginning of winter. Not a great time to repot something. Now is a great time. We're getting into spring and summer, but obviously I'm going to let it bloom first. And then we get new root growth with new growths. So we'll see. I may or may not repot it. I don't love plastic, as you know, but this plant is quite happy. It is probably getting to the point where it's filling that pot, but the flowers emerge from the base of a new growth. So like any other plant, the name of the game is new vegetative growth. And then these flowers stand up and are quite large. So once again, when this opens, which will be probably a month or so, I will do a standalone video because it will be so exciting. And then lastly, plant lovers, something that has been going on for a long time. Look at this. It's a stick, Matthew, a green stick. Yes, my Psychopsis, and this is Mendenhall, Psychopsis Mendenhall, Hildos. Now look, the spike is just growing. You see how tall it is now? That's well over a foot. So it's probably about 50, 60 centimeters. Still growing, still got lots to do. So this is a sequential bloomer. I had another one and it was still alive, but it was a bit scrappy. And you know, when we moved, I just had to make the difficult decision. I can't have multiples. This was the one that was very vigorous and healthy, and it had started to produce this flower spike. So this was the keeper, the other one wasn't. And I killed the yellow form, got root rot. Anyway, this plant, very, very happy. But look at that flower spike. Now, it started to emerge before we moved, which is 3 months ago. So that's how long it's taken to get this long. It was about 1 inch tall when we moved. Moving a plant when it's in bud is never a good idea, but this plant, it seems to like its new position. So the flower spike continued to grow, which is lucky. So when this finally flowers, once again, I will do a standalone video because I made the previous one years ago when I really had no idea, and I must have killed the plant about a month after I made that video. So this is a real testament to my perseverance and this plant's perseverance in putting up with me. So there we go, plant lovers. What's in bloom and what's coming into bloom this late spring here in Melbourne. Very exciting. It's great. You suddenly think, oh, there's a lot going on. And there'll be even more going on because next week I'll post another video. What it will be about, who knows? So you'll have to join me. Hit subscribe if you want to know what's going on next week. Amateur ramblings, as you've seen, but sometimes I think we hit the jackpot and it might help you figure out how to grow things in your neck of the woods, which is why I started this channel. So plant lovers, I hope all is well in your world, that you've got some exciting things cooking on the orchid front, and I look forward to seeing you next week.